The first breath of salt-laced air I took on my own terrace felt like the end of a 42-year-long exhalation. For 42 years, I had held my breath, waiting for a moment that was entirely my own. 42 years of rising before the sun, the hum of my first sewing machine, a constant companion in the pre-dawn quiet. 42 years of calloused fingers, of squinting over fabric under the dim light of a workshop lamp, of negotiating with suppliers who saw a young widow and assumed weakness. They were always wrong. 42 years of building a textile empire from a single spool of thread and a mountain of debt my late husband had left behind. Now, at 68 years old, I stood on the precipice of peace. I had sold the company, Vargas Textiles, for a sum that still felt unreal, $7 million. And, with a piece of that fortune, I had bought this. Not a house, but a sanctuary, a 3-story testament to survival, perched on a cliff overlooking the Pacific Ocean. Its walls were the color of sun-bleached sand, its floors were hardwood that groaned with the wisdom of age, and its windows, enormous bay windows, were designed to do one thing: swallow the golden light of the sunset whole. I held a warm coffee mug, my hands trembling not from age, but from the sheer, overwhelming weight of arrival. This was it, the reward. The proof that every sleepless night, every meal I skipped so my children could eat, every sacrifice etched into the lines on my face had been worth it. The sound of the waves crashing against the rocks below was a rhythm I had craved my entire life, a sound of untamable freedom. That night, as I prepared a simple dinner in a kitchen larger than my first apartment, the gleam of new appliances reflecting my solitary figure, my phone rang. It was Michael, my eldest. A familiar warmth spread through my chest, the instinctual glow only a mother knows. "Mom," he said, his voice bright, "congratulations again on the house. It looks incredible in the pictures. Jessica wants to say hi." Before I could respond, before I could tell him how the sea air felt or how the sunset had made me cry, his wife's voice, syrupy sweet and always grating on my nerves, came on the line. "Eleanor, honey, how exciting that you're all settled in. I'm so thrilled for you. Listen, I'm calling with the most wonderful news. Michael and I, along with my entire family, want to come see the house tomorrow. It will be a lovely surprise visit, just for a few days, a week at the most. So, I need you to do me a little favor. We'll need the master bedroom, of course, it being the largest. So if you could clear out your things and move into the guest room, that would be perfect. There are 11 of us coming, so we'll need all the space we can get. Oh, and if that's a problem for any reason, Michael mentioned seeing a little motel down the street. I'm sure they have rooms available." The world stopped turning. The waves outside continued their eternal rhythm, a mocking counterpoint to the sudden dead silence within me. The handcrafted wooden spoon I was holding clattered into the sink. A silence so profound, so heavy, it felt like a physical weight pressing down on my chest, squeezing the air from my lungs. Something deep inside me, a piece of the foundation I had so carefully built, fractured. I did not scream. I did not cry. I simply stood there, the phone pressed hard against my ear, listening to the void her words had created. In the background, I heard my son's voice, distant and muffled. "Mom, are you there?" "Yes," I whispered, the word a ghost of a sound. "I'm here." Jessica let out a light, tinkling laugh, the kind of laugh one makes after asking to borrow a cup of sugar, not after demanding the heart of someone's home. "Perfect," she chirped. "Then we'll see you tomorrow morning, say around 10 o'clock. I'll even bring things for breakfast. Well, you'll make it, right? You know how Michael loves his eggs, and you make them best." She hung up. I stood motionless in the center of that vast, beautiful kitchen. The recessed lighting I had spent a week choosing gleamed on the white quartz countertops. My hand, still clutching the phone, felt numb, a piece of stone attached to my arm. My breathing was a series of short, shallow gasps, as if I had been punched in the stomach. 11 people. 11 strangers in my house. The house I had purchased with the proceeds of my life's work. The company I had built from nothing after my husband's death left me with 3 small children and a $20,000 debt that felt like a millstone around my neck. I closed my eyes, and for a terrifying moment, I was 34 years old again. I was back at that rusty secondhand sewing machine, its rhythmic clatter the only music in our tiny, cramped apartment. I could see Michael, my firstborn, sleeping in a cardboard box beside me because we couldn't afford a crib. I could feel the sharp stabbing pain in my fingertips after an 18-hour shift trying to finish a rush order of school uniforms. I could hear the voice of the elementary school principal, his tone a mixture of pity and impatience. "Ma'am, if you don't pay the outstanding tuition, Michael cannot continue his studies here." Michael. The one I shielded from the world. The one who never knew the taste of hunger, because I often went to bed having had nothing but water so he could have the milk he needed. The one who earned an engineering degree from a prestigious university, a degree paid for by the sweat of my brow as I juggled 3 different sewing contracts simultaneously. The one who now, on the other end of that phone call, had remained silent while his wife casually, cruelly, kicked me out of my own bedroom, the one room in this house I had designed as my personal haven. Sleep was an impossibility that night. I sat on the terrace, wrapped in a blanket, watching the ink-black sea merge with the starless sky. The cold wind whipped at my face, a physical manifestation of the desolation I felt inside. For the first time in decades, a dangerous question crept into my mind. Was any of it worth it? Because this house was never just a collection of wood and glass and stone. It was my trophy. It was my medal for surviving a war no one else had seen. It was the tangible proof that after a lifetime of pouring every ounce of my being into others, I could finally give something back to myself. And with a single breezy phone call, they were trying to take it away from me. But what Jessica, in her sweet-toned arrogance, and what Michael, in his spineless silence, did not know, what they could not possibly comprehend, was that I had not clawed my way to where I was by being a woman who simply gives in. I had faced down creditors, I had outmaneuvered competitors, I had worked until my body screamed in protest. And though something inside me felt irrevocably broken that night, I also felt something else begin to stir in the wreckage. Something older, something harder, something far more dangerous. It was the dormant instinct of the survivor, the cold, calculating mind of the businesswoman who built an empire by being underestimated. I didn't get this far by being naive. And what was about to happen was going to be a stark, unforgettable reminder to them, and perhaps even to myself, of exactly who Eleanor Vargas truly was. If this story has already gripped your heart, subscribe to the channel now, because you will not want to miss the moment this woman reclaims not just her home, but her very soul. What she does next will leave you utterly speechless. They arrived not at 10 o'clock, but at 9 o'clock in the morning, a full hour ahead of their stated time. It was a power move, a clear and deliberate statement that my time, my schedule, was irrelevant. I was still in my silk pajamas, a luxury I had only recently allowed myself, my hair carelessly tied in a messy ponytail, when the sound of tires crunching on the gravel of my driveway shattered the morning peace. I peered out the second-floor window, and my heart sank. It was not one sport utility vehicle. It was 3. 3 enormous black sport utility vehicles that looked like a presidential motorcade, parked in a way that completely blocked my access to the garage. It was an invasion. I watched as they disembarked, an invading army claiming new territory. Arthur, Jessica's father, was the first one out. A man in his 60s with a pronounced belly straining against a polo shirt, wearing dark sunglasses that hid his eyes but not his air of arrogant ownership. He scanned my property, not with admiration but with assessment, as if he were calculating its resale value. Behind him came his wife, Sharon, a woman with a perpetually pursed expression, already laden with grocery bags as if she were moving in permanently. Then came Jessica's siblings. Brittany, a woman in her mid-30s wearing artfully ripped jeans and nails so long and ornate they looked like weapons, and Kyle, a young man whose entire world seemed to exist on the screen of the phone he never once looked up from. After them, the floodgates opened. The nephews, 4 of them, a whirlwind of screaming children who bolted directly for the beach, trampling my newly planted flower beds without a single glance toward the house or a word of greeting. And finally, an elderly aunt I had never met, leaning heavily on a cane, her face a mask of sour disapproval. 11 people. 11 strangers swarming my sanctuary, my place of peace, treating it like a public park with a complimentary hotel attached. Jessica was the last to emerge from the lead vehicle. She was dressed for a magazine cover in a flowing white linen dress, gold sandals, and sunglasses so large they obscured half her face. She spotted me in the window, a small figure in pajamas, and waved with a theatrical flourish, a queen greeting her subject. "Eleanor, darling," she called out, her voice carrying clearly in the morning air. "Did you make coffee yet? We're all absolutely starving from the drive." Behind her, Michael, my son, was wrestling with an enormous pile of suitcases. Our eyes met for a fleeting, terrible second. And in that single instant, I saw something that shattered me more than her arrogant words ever could. It was shame. My son was ashamed. But it was a weak, passive shame, not strong enough to make him stop this, not powerful enough to make him defend his own mother. I walked down the grand, curving staircase slowly, each step feeling like a descent into a nightmare of my own funding. I was still in my pajamas, a deliberate choice now, a silent protest they wouldn't even register. I was trying to understand how, in less than 24 hours, I had lost complete control of my own life. By the time I reached the bottom, Arthur was already inside, his shoes leaving tracks on my polished floors. He was pacing through my living room, running a hand over the back of my favorite armchair, the one I had found in a dusty antique shop and had lovingly restored. "Nice setup, ma'am," he boomed, not even bothering to look at me. "What did you say your name was again?" "Eleanor," I replied, my voice firmer than I felt. "Ah, right, Eleanor." He gestured dismissively at the armchair. "Good layout, but that chair there." He pointed a thick finger. "It clashes with the view of the ocean. You should get rid of it, replace it with something more modern." I said nothing. I simply watched as he continued his unauthorized tour, opening doors to rooms that were not his to enter, peering into closets, his commentary a running monologue of unsolicited critical advice. Jessica swept into the kitchen like a perfumed hurricane, dropping bags on the pristine countertops and immediately beginning to rummage through my cabinets. "Eleanor, I need you to show me where you keep the large frying pans. I'm going to make a massive batch of pancakes for everyone. Oh, and by the way, I took the liberty of reorganizing your pantry a little last night after you went to bed. It was a complete disaster, things were just everywhere. I pulled open the pantry door. My carefully arranged spices, which I had organized alphabetically, were now jumbled together. The delicate china teacups, the only inheritance I had from my own mother, had been shoved onto a high shelf I couldn't possibly reach, replaced by a garish collection of plastic tumblers they had brought with them. "Jessica," I began, my voice tight, "I didn't ask you to." "Don't be silly, Eleanor," she interrupted, not even looking at me. "It's just to make things more practical for everyone. Now that we're going to be here, the kitchen needs to be efficient. We're going to be here." The words hung in the air, a statement of fact, a settled deal I had no part in making. Michael came in then, his arms loaded with more bags. He moved through the house like a silent, obedient bellhop, his gaze fixed on the floor, avoiding my eyes. At one point, our paths crossed in the hallway. I opened my mouth to speak, to plead, to demand, but he just shook his head slightly and hurried up the stairs. The children were now rampaging through the house. I heard a sickening crash from the living room. One of them had knocked over a ceramic vase, a piece I had commissioned from a local artist for $300. It lay in 1,000 pieces on the hardwood floor. No one said a word of apology. Brittany, the child's mother, didn't even look up from her phone. "Mom, where do I put Aunt Agnes's things?" Kyle called from the top of the stairs. "In the master bedroom, of course," Jessica replied without a moment's hesitation. "It's the biggest one and it has the private bathroom. Her hip has been bothering her, she needs to be comfortable." My room, my master bedroom. The one with the uninterrupted view of the sea. The one I had just fitted with 1,000 thread-count Egyptian cotton sheets and curtains the color of ivory. The room where I had dreamed of waking up in peace for the rest of my days. "That," I said, my voice barely a whisper, "that's my room." Jessica finally turned to face me, a plastic smile plastered on her face, a smile that didn't come close to reaching her eyes. "Oh, Eleanor, don't be dramatic. We discussed this last night on the phone. You'll be perfectly fine in the guest room. Besides, it's just for a few days. A few days." It was the first of many, many lies. At lunchtime, my dining table, a solid oak piece that could seat 12, was filled with the loud, boisterous chatter of people I did not know. Arthur sat at the head of the table, in my chair, holding court as if he were the lord of the manor. Sharon served pancakes from my platters onto my plates. The children yelled and threw food. Brittany took an endless stream of selfies, pouting at her phone with the ocean as her backdrop. And Michael, Michael ate in absolute silence, his eyes glued to his plate, a prisoner in his own family's coup. In the middle of the cacophony, Jessica tapped her glass with a fork for attention. "Well, family," she announced brightly, "I have some wonderful news to share. After seeing how spacious and lovely this house is, Michael and I have decided that instead of staying for just 1 week, we're going to stay for 3. After all, the house is far too big for one person, and my dear mother-in-law is all alone here. It's much better this way, right, Eleanor? We can all keep each other company. 3 weeks. The fork slipped from my numb fingers, clattering onto my plate with a sharp metallic sound that no one but me seemed to notice. I desperately sought out Michael's eyes across the table. This time he didn't look away, but what I saw in them was worse than indifference, worse than shame. It was resignation. A defeated, helpless look that told me he was just as much a captive as I was, but he had chosen his side. "Mom, it's just," he started to say, his voice weak. But Jessica, ever the conductor of this orchestra, cut him off with a bright laugh. "Oh, your mom is thrilled, sweetie. Aren't you, Eleanor? Look how lovely this is. The whole family, together at last." I said nothing. I simply pushed my chair back, stood up from the table, and walked, with as much dignity as I could muster, up the stairs. I locked myself in the guest room, a small, cramped room at the back of the house, with a single window that overlooked the driveway, not the ocean. It had a single bed that creaked with every movement. I sat on the edge of that bed and took a single shuddering breath. 42 years of backbreaking work, $7 million in the bank, and I was a guest, a prisoner, sleeping in the smallest room of my very own house. That night I could hear their laughter from the terrace below. I heard the sound of music, the clinking of my wine glasses, the celebratory tones of a family on vacation. They were celebrating in my house, with my wine, on my terrace, while I sat alone in the dark, wondering at what precise moment I had ceased to be the owner of my own life. But as I sat there, a cold certainty began to form in the pit of my stomach. This was only the beginning. And though I didn't know the full extent of their plans yet, I knew with a chilling clarity that the worst, the absolute worst, was yet to come. On the 3rd day, I discovered my study, my one truly sacred space, had been commandeered. This was the only room I had designed with selfish intent. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the horizon. A custom-made walnut desk stood as the centerpiece, and a library of books I had collected over a lifetime lined the walls. It was here I had planned to read, to write my memoirs, perhaps even learn to paint. It was my refuge. When I pushed open the door that morning, I found Arthur firmly installed. He was leaning back in my ergonomic leather chair, his feet propped up on my pristine walnut desk, shouting into his phone. "I'm telling you, that parcel of land is worth double what they're asking. If you don't close the deal by noon today, I'm walking away. Yes, email the contracts to me. Give me the address here." He saw me standing in the doorway, a silent, stunned observer, and didn't even have the decency to take his feet off my desk. "Okay. Write this down." He barked into the phone. 47 Serenity Point. Yes, under the name Arthur Landeros. He was using my address, my home address, for his questionable business dealings. "Arthur," I said, my voice shaking with a rage I was struggling to contain, "this is my private study." He held up a single dismissive finger, signaling for me to wait, as if I were a junior employee interrupting a critical board meeting. He continued his loud, aggressive conversation for another 5 minutes. When he finally hung up, he looked at me as if just noticing my presence. "Ah, ma'am. It was Eleanor, right?" "Eleanor," I corrected through clenched teeth. "Right. Look, I need to use this space for a while. I have some important business to conduct, and it's far too noisy downstairs with all the kids running around. You understand, don't you? But this is my personal—" "Ma'am, don't be selfish," he cut me off, his tone condescending. "Besides, what does a woman your age need such a big office for anyway? With all due respect, you're not planning on starting a new career, are you?" I felt a bitter bile of fury rise in my throat. But before I could form a response, he was already dialing another number, turning his back to me completely, a clear and final dismissal. I closed the door and stood in the hallway, my body trembling, not from fear but from a profound, incandescent rage. The indignities, however, were far from over. Later that same afternoon, Jessica decided my kitchen needed a complete overhaul. I walked in to find a scene of utter chaos. All of my pots, my pans, my dishes were piled unceremoniously on the floor. She stood in front of the empty cabinets, hands on her hips, surveying her work with an air of professional expertise. "Oh, Eleanor. Good. You're here. Look, your kitchen is just so disorganized. It's impossible for anyone to find anything." So, I decided to arrange it the way it should be, a more logical system. "Jessica, I already had a system. I liked my system." "Yes, but it wasn't a functional system," she said, her tone that of a patient teacher explaining a simple concept to a slow child. "For example, why would you keep the soup bowls on the top shelf? Those are used almost every day. And these old china teacups? Honestly, Eleanor, no one uses things like this anymore. I'll just pack them away in a box for you." "Those cups," I said, my voice low and dangerous, "belong to my mother. They are the only things I have left of hers. You will not touch them." Jessica looked at me with that same condescending smile, the one that made me want to scream. "Oh, Eleanor, don't be so sentimental. They're just cups. Besides, look what I found. I bought some new ones that are much more modern and practical." She pulled a set of cheap plastic mugs from a shopping bag. They were adorned with tacky, brightly colored flowers. "I found them at the supermarket down the street. I just charged them to your account. I hope you don't mind. Oh, and speaking of that, while I was there, I went ahead and bought groceries for the entire family for the week. It came out to about $1,500. But, well, you have the money, right? That's what you sold your company for after all. $1,500 in 1 week. For food to feed 11 people I had never invited into my home, I took a deep, steadying breath. I counted to 10. I said nothing. Jessica, oblivious, continued to chatter as she rearranged my life, my memories, my kitchen, erasing every last trace of me from my own home. That evening, I made one last, desperate attempt to reason with Michael. I found him alone on the terrace, staring out at the dark sea, a bottle of beer in his hand. I approached him cautiously, as if he were a skittish animal. "Son," I began softly. "Mom, please don't start," he sighed, not even looking at me. "Michael, I can't continue like this. This is my house. I bought it with my money, and your wife—" "My wife is trying to be kind," he snapped, finally turning to face me. "She's trying to help you. She's bringing family into this big, empty house. Helping. Is spending $1,500 of my money without asking helping? Is kicking your own mother out of her bedroom helping?" He turned to me then, and the look in his eyes was not one of anger but of a deep, weary exhaustion, as if I were a burden he had been forced to carry for years. "Mom, you have 5 bedrooms. 5. And you live here all alone. Don't you think it's just a little bit selfish to want all this space just for yourself?" The word selfish landed like a physical blow. "Selfish?" I repeated, my voice a hollow echo. "I'm selfish?" "I didn't mean it like that," he mumbled, looking away. "But look, Jessica and I are just starting our lives. We have expenses, we have plans for the future. You've already lived your life, Mom. Now it's our turn. You've already lived your life." Those 5 words. Those 5 simple words pierced my chest like a rusty knife and twisted. "I've already lived my life," I whispered, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. "Do you really believe that, Michael?" He sighed again, a long, drawn-out sound of frustration. He took another long swallow of beer and turned his gaze back to the sea, a clear signal that the conversation was over. "I'm just asking you to be understanding, Mom. It's family. Family." The word, which had once been my anchor, my entire reason for being, now sounded like the clinking of a chain. I turned and walked away, back up the stairs to my small room, my guest room, my prison cell. But later that night, as the house slept, I walked past the master bedroom, my room. The door was slightly ajar. I heard a voice, Jessica's voice, filled with that fake, cheerful tone I had come to despise. I peeked through the crack. She was on a video call, panning her phone around my bedroom, showing it off like a real estate agent giving a tour. "No, girl, I swear, the house is absolutely incredible. Yes, we've basically scored it for the entire summer. The mother-in-law is super chill about it. We told her it was just for a week, but we've been here 5 days and she hasn't said a single word. She let out that light, carefree laugh, the laugh of someone who knows they have won. Well, what can you do, girl? She has 5 bedrooms and lives all by herself. What does one person need all that space for anyway? We're the ones who actually know how to enjoy life. I continued on to my room, my heart a block of ice in my chest. I locked the door. I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the ceiling. And for the first time in many, many years, I felt an old, familiar sensation awakening within me. It was the survival instinct. The raw, primal instinct that had kept me and my children alive when I was a young, grieving widow. The instinct that had fueled me to build an empire from nothing. The instinct I thought had gone dormant, but was now waking up with a terrifying and exhilarating clarity. Because I did not get to where I am by letting people walk all over me. And if they thought they could steal my peace, my house, and my dignity, they were about to discover who I really was. But not yet. Not yet. First, I needed to understand just how deep their deception ran, how far they were truly willing to go, and what I discovered next was so much worse than I could have ever, in my wildest nightmares, imagined. On the 10th night, sleep was a distant country I could not reach. It wasn't the sound of the waves, or the unfamiliar creak of the guest bed, or even the white-hot rage that had been simmering inside me for days. It was a single, insistent thought repeating over and over in my mind like a warning bell. This is not normal. This is not just a case of inconsiderate house guests. There is something more happening here, something calculated. It was 3 o'clock in the morning when I finally gave up and went downstairs to the kitchen for a glass of water. The house was shrouded in a heavy silence, a silence that felt different now, not peaceful, but menacing. As I passed through the living room, a faint blue glow caught my eye. It was the tablet Michael and Jessica shared, left on the coffee table. The screen was lit up, forgotten, an application left open. I moved closer, drawn by an instinct I couldn't explain, and what I saw on that screen did not just break my heart, it shattered it into a million irreparable pieces. It was a text conversation between my son and his wife, dated 2 weeks ago, 2 weeks before I had even closed on this house. Jessica, I already spoke to my dad. He says the smartest thing to do is convince your mom to sign the house over to us while she's alive. That way we avoid any problems with your siblings later on. My heart stopped beating. I could feel the blood turn to ice in my veins. Michael, I don't know, Jess. My mom just bought it. I don't think she'll want to sign it away so quickly. Jessica, that's the whole point, sweetie. We have to work on her, gently, little by little. First, we'll just stay over for a visit. We make ourselves indispensable. Then, my dad can come in and explain all the tax benefits of putting the property in our names. Your mom doesn't understand all that complicated stuff. My hands began to shake so violently I had to grip the edge of the coffee table to steady myself. I kept reading, my eyes scanning the words that were methodically plotting the theft of my life's work. Michael, what if she says no? Jessica, she's not going to say no. She's your mother. She adores you. Besides, let's be honest, what does she really need a house like this for at her age? She's already lived her life. We're the ones just starting out. We have a right to live well, too. She's already lived her life. There it was again, that phrase. That cruel, dismissive phrase, as if my life were a book that had already been read and placed back on the shelf to gather dust. I scrolled further down the conversation. It got worse. So much worse. Jessica, my dad says we have to act fast before she gets any ideas about putting the house in all 3 of her kids' names. If she signs it over just to you, your brother and sister can't claim anything later. Michael, I feel bad for Clara and Daniel. Jessica, why should you? They left the country. They abandoned you and your mom when you needed them most. You're the one who stayed here. You're the one who deserves this house. A lie. A vicious, poisonous lie. My other children, Clara and Daniel, had left for incredible work opportunities abroad, with my full blessing, with my financial support. We spoke on the phone every single week. The 3 of us were as close as ever. How dare she twist their success into a narrative of abandonment to poison my son's mind against his own siblings? But the final message, the one sent just 5 days ago, was the one that finally broke me. Jessica, your mom is already getting uncomfortable with us being here. Perfect. That's the idea. The more uncomfortable and overwhelmed she is, the faster she'll want to simplify her life and hand things over. My dad already has the legal papers drawn up. We just need to get her to sign. And Michael's response. My son's response. A simple 2-word reply that sealed his betrayal. Michael. Okay, let's do it. The glass of water I had come for slipped from my nerveless grasp and shattered on the hardwood floor. The sound exploded in the silent house like a gunshot. I stood there, barefoot, surrounded by a glittering sea of broken glass, tears streaming down my face in hot, uncontrollable rivers. But these were not tears of sadness. They were tears of something more primal. They were tears of betrayal, the kind of soul-deep pain that can only be inflicted by someone you gave life to. Michael. My Michael. The tiny baby I had held in one arm while sewing with the other. The little boy I had fiercely defended when other children made fun of his patched-up, worn-out shoes. The young man whose face had glowed with pride as they handed him his college diploma, a piece of paper I had paid for with my own blood, sweat, and sleepless nights. That Michael was not just stealing from me, he was erasing me, treating me as if I were a nuisance, a loose end to be tied up, an annoying old woman who had already lived her life and now just needed to get out of the way. I went back up the stairs in a silent daze, still barefoot, not even feeling the cold of the floor. I passed the master bedroom, my room, where Aunt Agnes was snoring loudly. I passed the room where Brittany and her boyfriend were sleeping. I passed the study where Arthur had left his briefcase full of his shady documents. And I arrived at the guest room. My cell. I sat on the edge of the bed and looked down at my hands. These hands had built an empire. These hands had signed million-dollar contracts. These hands had never once trembled before any business rival, before any challenge. And in that moment, something inside me died. The naive, hopeful mother who still believed that a mother's love was an unbreakable shield, she was gone forever. But something else, something far more formidable, ignited in her place. I cried for the rest of that night. I cried for the 42 years I had spent building a future for children who now saw me as nothing more than an obstacle. I cried for the dream of this house, a dream of rest that had been twisted into a nightmare of humiliation. But when the first rays of dawn painted the sky, the tears were gone. In their place was only clarity. A cold, calculating, and relentless clarity. Because I didn't build an empire by being naive. I built it by being smart, by being patient, by being able to see 10 moves ahead while my competitors were only seeing one. And if Jessica and Michael thought they could play me, they were about to find out that I had invented the game. I got up. I washed my face, erasing all traces of the tears. I dressed with meticulous care. White linen pants, a coral-colored silk blouse, and the single strand of pearls I had bought myself when I closed my first major contract. I applied my makeup. I styled my hair. When I went down for breakfast, they were all in the kitchen, a chaotic scene of their own making. Jessica was at my stove, making eggs. Arthur was reading the newspaper at my dining table. Michael was staring blankly at his phone. "Good morning," I said, my voice bright and clear, a smile fixed on my face. They all looked up, visibly surprised. It was the first smile they had seen from me in days. "Oh, Eleanor, you look so lovely," Jessica said, her voice dripping with insincerity. "Thank you, my dear. You know, I've been doing a lot of thinking, and you are all absolutely right. This house is far too big and overwhelming for me to manage all by myself." I saw a flicker of triumph in Jessica's eyes, the glint of a shark smelling blood in the water. "See, Michael? I've been telling you that 1,000 times. Yes," I continued, my voice smooth as silk. "So, I've decided I'm going to make some changes. Some very important changes." "What kind of changes?" Arthur asked, putting down his newspaper. His interest clearly piqued. "You'll see," I said, maintaining my serene smile. "But it will take a few days. I have to take care of some legal matters first." Jessica and Arthur exchanged a quick, triumphant glance. They thought they had won. What they didn't know was that I had also exchanged a look with my own reflection in the mirror that morning. And in that reflection, I had made a solemn pact with the woman staring back at me. A pact that was about to change everything. But first, I needed to make a phone call to the only person on this earth I could still trust implicitly. I left the house with the excuse of going to the grocery store. I needed air. I needed space to think without feeling their greedy eyes on my back. I drove not to the store but to the pier and parked my car facing the ocean. I took out my phone and dialed the number saved under the name Sam, Samantha Aguirre, attorney at law, my lawyer for 30 years, but more than that, my friend. The woman who had helped me register my company when it was just a tiny sewing workshop in my garage. The woman who had reviewed every contract, guided every negotiation, and celebrated every single victory on my way to the top. She answered on the second ring. "Eleanor, what's wrong? You sound strange." And there, sitting in my car with the windows down and the scent of salt filling my lungs, I told her everything. The surprise invasion, the daily humiliations, the commandeered rooms, and finally, the text messages on the tablet. The cold, calculated plan to steal my home. When I finished, there was a long, heavy silence on the other end of the line. "That son of a—" Sam began, her voice tight with fury, but she cut herself off. "Do you have proof? Did you take pictures of the messages?" "No," I said, my voice thick with regret. "I was in shock. I just ran." "It's okay," she said, her voice shifting from angry friend to sharp as attack lawyer. "We'll get something better. Listen to me very carefully, Eleanor. Do not say another word to them. Do not do anything. Act normal. Pretend you're considering their proposal. I'm going to start digging into this family. Something tells me this isn't the first time they've pulled a stunt like this." "What do you mean?" "Arthur Landeros," she said. "That name. It rings a bell. Give me 24 hours. We hung up. I sat there for a long time, just watching the waves crash against the rocks with a beautiful, liberating violence. And then a strange thing happened. My mind began to drift back, not to the recent pain, but further. I remembered who I was before I became mom, before I became mother-in-law, before I became ma'am. I remembered Eleanor Vargas at 34, with 3 children, $0 in the bank, and a heart full of grief. I remembered the first night after my husband's funeral, the silence of the house pressing down on me, the weight of my children's future, a physical burden on my shoulders. I remembered choosing to fight. I sewed school uniforms for $5 a pair of pants. I worked 18 hours a day. My fingers bled. My back ached. But we survived. 1 month, 6 months, a year. Within 5 years, I had 10 employees. Within 20 years, I was a national supplier. After 42 years, I had sold my empire. 42 years of refusing to give up. 42 years of saying no to fear, to exhaustion, and to defeat. And now, I was going to let myself be defeated by a manipulative schemer and a son who had lost his way? No. I started the car and drove back, but not directly to the house. First, I stopped at the bank and spoke to my private wealth manager. I needed to move some assets, protect my liquid capital. Then, I went to the notary's office and requested certified copies of the deed to my house. I placed them in a sealed manila envelope in my car's glove compartment. Finally, I stopped at a small coffee shop and ordered a black coffee, straight up, bitter and strong, the way I used to drink it before everyone told me it wasn't good for a woman of my age. My age. As if turning 68 had transformed me into a fragile piece of furniture that needed to be handled with care and eventually replaced. I drank that coffee slowly, savoring every sip, remembering every battle I had won. When I returned to the house, it was nearly 6 o'clock in the evening. The entire family was on the terrace, drinking piña coladas they had made with my rum, from my glasses. "Eleanor, where have you been?" Jessica called out. "We were starting to think you got lost." "Just running some errands," I replied calmly. "Did you bring anything for dinner?" "We finished all the leftovers from lunch." Of course they had. It was 11 mouths to feed. "No," I said, heading for the stairs. "I didn't bring any dinner." I heard them murmuring behind me, a flurry of annoyed whispers. It was not the response of the docile, compliant old woman they were expecting. That night, lying in my small bed, my phone buzzed. It was Sam. "Eleanor, I have information, and you are not going to like it. Tell me." Arthur Landeros has a clean legal record, but his moral record is murky. I found 3 civil cases in the past 10 years where families accused him of real estate fraud. He finds elderly people with assets, convinces them to sign over properties in exchange for care that never materializes, and then he sells the properties and disappears. They've never been able to make it stick legally, but the pattern is there. My stomach turned. And Jessica? Jessica Landeros Cruz. This is the interesting part. She has an active lawsuit against her, a $250,000 pyramid scheme. She convinced 17 women to invest in a cosmetics business that never existed. It's in active litigation. Michael doesn't know about it. How can you be sure he doesn't know? Because the lawsuit was filed 2 months ago, and Jessica's legal address is listed as her parents' home, not the apartment she shares with your son. She's been hiding it from him. I closed my eyes. It all clicked into place with a sickening finality. They needed money. A lot of money. And I, with my $7 million sale, was the perfect, unsuspecting bank. Sam, I said, my voice cold and steady, I need your help. For what? To set a trap. There was a pause on the line, and then I heard Sam's familiar, wolfish grin through the phone. Eleanor Vargas. I thought you'd never ask. Tell me exactly what you need. And there, in that small, cramped room that smelled of humidity and defeat, I began to outline the most important business plan of my life. It was not going to be fast. It was not going to be easy. But it was going to be flawless. Because I hadn't gotten this far by being impulsive. I had gotten this far by being a strategist. And they were about to step into a game in which I had a 42-year head start. The morning of the 14th day dawned gray and overcast, as if the sky itself knew something was about to break. I was in the kitchen, calmly making tea, when I heard unfamiliar male voices coming from the living room. I peeked around the corner. Arthur was sitting in my gray velvet armchair, the one he so openly detested, speaking with a portly man in an ill-fitting suit. A leather briefcase sat open on my coffee table, its contents, a stack of legal documents, scattered across the surface. So, with this particular clause, the transfer is exempt from capital gains taxes, the man in the suit was saying. It's completely legal. The lady signs the property over to her son as a living gift, and you save yourselves a great deal of trouble with the Internal Revenue Service, not to mention any potential claims from other heirs down the line. My blood ran cold. It was 8 o'clock in the morning, and they had brought a notary public into my home. Without my knowledge, without my consent, I took a deliberate step into the room and cleared my throat. Both men turned, startled. Arthur did not even have the decency to look ashamed. Ah, Mrs. Eleanor. Perfect timing. Look, this is Mr. Evans. He's a notary. I called him to advise us on the most convenient way to handle the transfer of your house. Excuse me? The words came out like chips of ice. The notary, Mr. Evans, stood up, looking deeply uncomfortable. Ma'am, I understand this might seem a bit sudden, but Mr. Landeros explained to me that you had already made the decision to sign the property over to your son. I am simply here to formalize the process. I have made no such decision, I said, each word laced with a tightly controlled fury. Arthur stood up then, that infuriating, condescending smirk plastered on his face. Now, Eleanor, don't get yourself all worked up. It's just a formality. Michael is your son. Eventually everything you have will be his anyway. Why complicate things? It's better to do it now, simple and clean. Besides, think of the tax benefits for the family. Get out. What? Get out of my house, I repeated, my voice rising. You and the notary. Now, Mr. Evans, to his credit, began gathering his papers with frantic speed, muttering apologies. Ma'am, I had no idea. I was under the impression this was an arranged matter. My sincerest apologies. He practically fled from the house. Arthur, however, did not move. He simply stared at me with his small, calculating eyes. You are making a very big mistake, ma'am. My daughter and your son are making life plans together. This house could be the inheritance you provide for your future grandchildren. Don't you want that for your family? My family does not include con artists, I spat, the words spilling out before I could stop them. His expression changed instantly. The friendly, avuncular mask fell away, and for a terrifying second, I saw the pure, undiluted contempt he held for me. You should be very careful what you say, ma'am. Or what? I challenged, stepping closer. Are you going to threaten me in my own home? We were locked in a silent battle of wills when Jessica descended the stairs, wrapped in a silk robe, yawning delicately. What is all this shouting about? Dad, what happened? Nothing, honey. It's just that your dear mother-in-law doesn't seem to understand that we are only trying to help her. I do not need your help, I said, turning my gaze to her. And I want you to leave. All of you. Today. Jessica stared at me as if I had just started speaking in another language. Leave? Eleanor, you're joking, right? I am not kidding. But we've been here for 2 weeks now. You can't just kick us out into the street like this. Besides, where would we go? We had plans to stay until the end of the month. That, I said coldly, is not my problem. Her face transformed. The fake sweetness evaporated, and what was left was cold, hard, and dangerous. I see. So that's how it is. You'll use family when it's convenient for you. Is that it? When you needed someone to look after you while you were building your precious little company, Michael was there for you. But now that you have your money, you throw us out like stray dogs. My little company, I repeated, feeling every muscle in my body tense, cost me 42 years of my life. And I am not going to let a common con artist— Con artist? Jessica shrieked, her voice rising to a hysterical pitch. How dare you? $250,000. Pyramid scheme. Does that sound familiar to you? The color drained from her face. Who? Who told you that? Does Michael know? Does your husband know that you are being sued for fraud? Does he know that the only thing you want from this family is my money to pay off your debts? You don't know anything. Her voice was trembling now. I am not interested in knowing anything more. I want you, your father, your mother, your siblings, and every single person you brought into this house to be gone by 6 o'clock this evening. I turned to walk up the stairs, my point made, but her next words stopped me cold. They were spoken in a low, venomous tone. If you kick us out, Michael goes with us. I froze, my hand on the banister. What did you say? You heard me, Eleanor. Michael is on my side, not yours. If we go, he goes. And he will never speak to you again. Are you really willing to lose your only son over a selfish old woman's temper tantrum? Something inside me finally snapped in that moment. It wasn't the threat itself, it was the word old, delivered with such acidic contempt, as if my age were a disease, a mark of worthlessness. As if my 68 years of life and work and sacrifice meant absolutely nothing. I turned around slowly. Michael is a grown man. He can choose whatever he wants. But this house is mine. And nobody, absolutely nobody, is going to take it from me. I walked up the stairs without looking back. I went into my small room and locked the door. And then I heard it. The one thing that destroyed what little hope I had left. It was Michael's voice in the hallway. What happened? Why is everyone yelling? Your mother, Jessica said, her voice breaking into a masterful performance of a perfect wounded victim. She's kicking us out. She called us con artists. She says we're not welcome here anymore. She told me you have to choose between her and me. Mom did what? You heard me, Michael. After everything we've done for her, she treats us like we're garbage. There was a beat of silence, and then came the words that sank me into a deeper despair than anything else had. All right, we're leaving. Pack up everything. I am not going to let her treat my wife like that. I heard his footsteps moving away. I heard doors closing and opening. I heard the sound of suitcases being dragged across the floor, and I just sat there, on that small, creaky bed, feeling the world I had spent 42 years building with my own 2 hands crumble into dust around me. But a strange thing happened in that moment of utter devastation. I didn't cry. There were no tears left to shed. There was only something colder, harder, and far more lethal taking their place. Because in that instant, I finally, completely, understood. Michael had made his choice, and he had not chosen me. I took out my phone and called Sam. Are you ready? I asked, my voice devoid of all emotion. I've been ready for days, Eleanor. Then it's time. Let's do this. Are you absolutely sure? She asked gently. Because after this, there is no going back. I looked out the small window. I saw the suitcases being loaded into the 3 sport utility vehicles. I saw Jessica directing the entire operation like a general leading a victorious campaign. I saw Michael, my Michael, obeying her every command without question, his shoulders slumped in defeat. "I'm sure," I said. "Perfect. Tomorrow at 10 o'clock sharp. Bring everyone. We are going to give them the show of their lives." I hung up the phone, and for the first time in 14 agonizing days, I smiled. It was not a smile of joy or of warmth. It was a smile of pure, unadulterated, and long overdue justice. The house fell silent that afternoon. A deep, profound silence that felt both empty and liberating. I watched from the second-floor window as the caravan of 3 sport utility vehicles pulled away, taking with them my son, my towels, and several bottles of my best wine. Before he left, Michael had come upstairs. He had knocked gently on the guest room door. "Mom." I did not open it. I could not. "Mom, please, let's just talk about this." I remained silent, sitting ramrod straight on the bed, my hands clasped tightly in my lap. "Fine," he said finally, his voice heavy with a resignation that mirrored my own. "If this is what you want, be well." I listened to his footsteps retreat down the hall, listened to the front door close, listened to the sound of my son choosing a life built on a foundation of lies. When the last echo of their tires on the gravel had faded, I went downstairs. The house was a war zone. Dirty dishes were piled in the sink, wet towels were thrown over my antique furniture, and the terrace was littered with empty bottles and cigarette butts. My study, my sacred space, was the worst, with crumpled papers on the floor and cigar ash ground into my walnut desk. But the house was mine again. I spent the entire night cleaning, not because I had to, but because I needed to. I needed to physically reclaim every inch of my space, to scrub away not just the physical dirt but the toxic energy they had left in their wake. At 2 o'clock in the morning, with the house finally restored to order, I made myself a cup of chamomile tea and sat on the terrace. The sea was calm and the stars were scattered across the black velvet sky with a clarity I hadn't seen in weeks. I took out my phone and called Clara, my daughter, my middle child, the one who had inherited my fiery temperament. "Mom, are you okay? It's 2 in the morning here in Barcelona." "I'm not okay," I said, and for the first time, my voice trembled with the sheer weight of it all. "But I'm going to be. I need to tell you something." And I told her everything. From Jessica's very first phone call to the final, ugly confrontation that afternoon. The text messages on the tablet, the notary, the lawsuit against Jessica, everything. When I finished, there was a long silence on the line. "That," Clara began, her voice tight with rage. "Mom, why didn't you call us sooner?" "Because I was ashamed," I whispered. "Ashamed of what?" "Of having raised a son who was capable of doing this to his own mother. That is not your fault, Mom. Michael was always malleable. Dad knew it. I know it. Daniel knows it. That's why someone like Jessica could sink her claws into him so easily." The words were painful, but they were the truth. "What are you going to do now?" she asked. "Something I should have done from the very beginning. I'm going to fight back." "Count on me," she said without a moment's hesitation. "What do you need?" "For now," I said, "just your support, and your brother's. Because what's coming next is going to be ugly. You've got it. Always." We hung up. I called Daniel next, my youngest, the quiet, thoughtful one in Toronto. He offered the same unwavering, unconditional support. And there, wrapped in the love of 2 of my 3 children, I finally felt like I could breathe again. The next morning, at precisely 9 o'clock, Sam arrived. She was not alone. She was accompanied by a young man with sharp eyes and a laptop, and a woman who radiated an aura of quiet, formidable competence. "Eleanor, this is David Chen, a private investigator. And this is Rebecca Stone. She specializes in civil fraud and will be acting as a legal witness." David opened his laptop on my living room coffee table. "What we've uncovered is extensive," he began. "Arthur Landeros Puga, 63 years old. In the last 15 years, he has been peripherally involved in 7 cases of property dispossession from elderly individuals. His method is always the same. He uses a close family member to get close, offers legal and financial help to protect their assets, and somehow, he or his associate ends up with the property. He showed me photos on his screen. The faces of elderly people, their eyes filled with a weary sadness. This woman," he said, pointing to a photo, lost her home in Palm Springs. Arthur convinced her to put it in her daughter's name. The daughter was married to Arthur's son. 6 months later, the daughter filed for divorce, sold the house, and the woman ended up in a state-run nursing home. I felt a wave of nausea. And Jessica, David continued, switching screens. Active lawsuit for $250,000. Pyramid scheme. 17 victims. He showed me their names. Some had invested their life savings. It was Sam who connected the final, painful dot. They didn't target Michael, Eleanor. They targeted you. The wedding was 2 years ago, correct? I nodded. Right after you closed that huge contract with Nordstrom. It was in the local business journal. Textile entrepreneur Eleanor Vargas closes $1 million deal. They read that article, and they started planning. I leaned back against the sofa, the full, painful picture finally coming into focus. So it was never about my son. No, said David softly. It was always about you. I closed my eyes and took a deep, steadying breath. What do we do now? Sam smiled, a sharp, predatory smile I had seen 1,000 times in boardrooms just before she was about to win a case. Now we spring the trap. And to do that, you need to do something that is going to hurt you more than anything else has. What is that? You are going to call Michael. You are going to apologize. And you are going to invite them all to a reconciliation dinner in 3 days' time. What? Why would I do that? Because we need them to feel safe again. We need them to lower their guard. We need them to believe they have won. And then, Rebecca added, her voice calm and authoritative, then we show them everything we have. They won't come, I said. Michael is furious with me. They will come, Sam said with absolute certainty, because you are going to tell them exactly what they want to hear. You're going to tell them that you've had time to think, that you were confused and scared, and that you want to fix everything, with legal documents involved. They will walk right into the lion's den because they'll think the lion has been declawed. David pulled a thick yellow folder from his briefcase. It's all in here. Proof of Arthur's scams, documents from Jessica's lawsuit. And one more thing I found this morning. He opened the folder. Inside was a series of printouts from a private Facebook group. Jessica has a group with her siblings and cousins. It's called Operation Big House. He slid a screenshot across the table to me. The words were there. Clear. Brutal. A message from Brittany to Jessica. So, what happens after the old lady signs everything over? Is she just going to keep living there with you guys? And Jessica's reply. No. My dad already has a nice nursing home picked out. It's about $5,000 a month. We can cover that by selling off her antique furniture. A nursing home. They were planning to put me in a nursing home after they stole my house. Something inside me didn't just break, it hardened into stone. When do we do this? I asked, my voice a stranger to my own ears. Saturday, at 7 in the evening, said Sam. Invite them for dinner. Tell them you want to talk about doing things the right way. We'll arrive at 8. That night I made the call. It took every ounce of my 42 years of business acumen to keep my voice steady. Son, it's me. There was a long silence on the other end. I want to talk, with you and with Jessica. I know I behaved badly. I was confused and I was scared, but I want to fix things. Mom, please. One dinner, Michael. On Saturday, just us. We can talk calmly about everything. About the house, about the future, about what's best for everyone. There was a long pause. Are you serious? Very serious. I'll talk to Jess. Thank you, son. He hung up. 20 minutes later, I received a text message. It was from Jessica. We'll be there, Eleanor. Glad you finally came to your senses. See you on Saturday. I put the phone down. Sam was right. They had taken the bait. And I was ready to set the hook. Saturday dawned with a sky so brilliantly blue, it seemed almost artificial. I spent the entire day cooking. Not because I wanted to impress them, but because I needed to keep my hands busy, to stop my mind from replaying the betrayals over and over. I made a pot roast, Michael's favorite dish since he was a small boy. The one I made for his birthdays, his graduations, every significant milestone of his life. I used my mother's recipe, the one with 32 ingredients that takes 3 days to prepare properly. I made it perfectly. Because I wanted him to remember. I wanted that when this was all over, the taste of this meal would be the taste of his loss. At 5 o'clock, Sam, David, and Rebecca arrived. They set up a small, portable projector in the dining room, aimed at the large, blank wall. At 10 minutes to 7, I heard the crunch of tires. A single sport utility vehicle this time. Just the key players: Michael, Jessica, Arthur, and Sharon. I opened the door with a practiced, gentle smile. Come in, come in. I'm so glad you could make it. Jessica gave me a stiff air kiss hug. We wanted to fix things too, Eleanor. We're family, after all. I led them to the dining room. I served the meal myself, using my best crystal glasses, the ones I inherited from my grandmother. I opened a bottle of expensive red wine I had been saving for a special occasion. And this, I thought, was a very special occasion. Let's make a toast, I said, raising my glass, to family, to finding solutions, and to doing things the right way. Cheers, they all echoed, their glasses clinking against mine. I barely took a sip. Dinner proceeded with a tense, superficial politeness. At precisely 5 minutes to 8, the doorbell rang. Are you expecting someone else? Jessica asked, a note of suspicion in her voice. Yes, I said, standing up. My lawyers. I opened the door. Sam, Rebecca, and David walked in, dressed in formal business attire, their faces grim and professional. Good evening, Sam said, her voice commanding the room. I am Samantha Aguirre, legal representative for Mrs. Eleanor Vargas. This is Rebecca Stone and private investigator David Chen. What is this? Jessica jumped to her feet. Eleanor, you said we were going to talk as a family. We are going to talk, I replied, my voice as calm as the sea on a windless day. But we are going to do it with the truth on the table. David connected his laptop to the projector. The dining room wall lit up. What you are about to see, Rebecca began, is the result of an exhaustive investigation. The first image that appeared was the text message conversation from the tablet, blown up for all to see. Michael went ghost white. The next image was the Facebook group. Operation Big House. Message after message, detailing their plan, their contempt. And then, the final, damning screenshot about the nursing home. No, Michael whispered, shaking his head. This can't be real. But there's more, David said, changing the slide. The 7 cases against Arthur, the faces of his victims. Then, the official court documents for Jessica's pyramid scheme lawsuit. Michael finally turned to his wife, his eyes filled with a dawning, horrified understanding. What is this, Jessica? I can explain. Then explain, he shouted, his voice cracking, the first real emotion I had seen from him in weeks. Why is there a lawsuit against you that I know nothing about? Michael, I said, my voice cutting through the chaos. Do you understand now? She didn't marry you for love. She married you to get to my money. You were just the key to the door. My son looked at me, and in his eyes I watched his entire world shatter. Mom, he whispered. I didn't know. I know you didn't, son. That's why you are here tonight, because I still believe there is something inside of you worth saving. We are leaving, Jessica said, grabbing Michael's arm. Sit down, Rebecca commanded. We are not finished. Yes, you are, Sam added, her voice like steel. Because if you walk out that door right now, tomorrow morning I will file a formal complaint for attempted fraud, conspiracy, and elder abuse. And believe me, with the evidence we have, all 3 of you will be facing significant jail time. That stopped them cold. What do you want? Arthur asked, his voice a low growl. And that's when I spoke, with all the authority of a woman who had built an empire and would not be brought down by petty thieves. I want you out of my life. I want you to sign documents renouncing any and all future claims on my estate, and I want Jessica to tell Michael the truth. All of it, right now. Fine, Jessica whispered, slumping into her chair like a puppet whose strings had been cut. Fine, I'll tell him everything. Michael was still standing, his hands shaking, looking at the woman he thought he knew as if she were a complete stranger. Jess? She lifted her tear-streaked face, the carefully constructed mask of sweetness now a grotesque mess. We got married because my dad saw an opportunity, she began, her voice barely audible. He saw the article in the business journal about your mom, about her company, about the money. He said we had to get close, Get close? Michael repeated, the words like poison on his tongue. I was desperate, she sobbed. The lawsuit. I needed money, a lot of money, and my dad said your family was the solution. The solution? My son's voice broke. I loved you. I introduced you to my mother. I built my life around you. I know. But then she bought this house. And my dad said we could have so much more. The plan was to stay here, make you uncomfortable, make you feel like a burden until you agreed to sign over the property. And after that? Michael asked, his voice hollow. What happened after I convinced my own mother to give away her home? We were going to get a divorce. I would get half of the house in the settlement. We'd sell it. I would pay off my debts. And we would go our separate ways. The silence that followed was a crushing physical weight. Michael swayed on his feet, grabbing the back of a chair to steady himself. You never loved me at all. Jessica's silence was the only answer he needed. Son, I started to say, but he held up a hand. No, Mom, just